it's Alice, and today it's gonna be all about graphic novels. I love a good graphic novel every now and then. I think it's a great way of telling a story, and I love art and looking at art, so reading a graphic novel feels like a real treat to me. I have read quite a few, and I have quite a few favorites that I want to show you, and then I also have a TBR that I want to talk about a little bit. Generally speaking, I do like the graphic novels that I gravitate towards are like standalones or in shorter series, or if they're in a series you can read them as a standalone. So those are the ones that I usually read and love. I do have a little bit of a hard time finding them sometimes, so if anyone has any recommendations at the end of this, do let me know because I'm always looking for more. We're going to start with my favorites though, and the first one that I have is either the first graphic novel that I read as an adult or one of the first, and I read it for the first time years and years ago, and I got the recommendation off of BookTube. It's Mouse by Art Spiegelman, and this is a little bit different than all of the other ones that I'm going to mention because this is actually non-fiction, and it's like a biography memoir type thing, and it tells the story of the author and his father. The father is a Jewish survivor of the Holocaust, and we get to know him and the son who is grappling with his father's story and everything that happened, what that has done to his father. It does tell the story in a really interesting way though, because the characters, or like the people, are drawn as animals. So the Jewish people are mice and the Nazis are cats, and then there are a couple of other peoples that are different kinds of animals, and that's how everyone, like that's how the people are portrayed, which is very interesting. I do find it difficult to explain how amazing this book is, but like it is so good, and the story is just so impactful and harrowing, and it's just amazing. I do think sometimes, like when I show the art, it doesn't draw everyone in, and I understand that this might not be everyone's art style, and this, like when I first started reading this for the first time, I didn't know how to feel about the art, but it really does work, and it fits the story incredibly well, and it is actually very well done. But there are no colors or anything, but like you do recognize the characters even though they're drawn relatively simple, and it's so good. And this is one of my go-to recommendations. If someone just asks for a recommendation, I'm like, this is a great one. It is also, because it's a graphic novel, a relatively quick read, but it's longer than a lot of the other graphic novels that I've read, but I feel like it needs it because of the story, and it just is, it's so well done. I think everyone should read this book. Side note though, there are a few editions of this where it's like split into two. So there's like Mouse 1 and 2. I have an edition that has both in one. So if you're gonna get it, just make sure that you're like aware of what part you're getting, or if you're getting both parts or just one or whatever. But yeah, such a good book, this one. Then we've got these two massive books by one of my favorite graphic novel artists, Isabel Greenberg. The first one we have is The 100 Nights of Hero, and this has taken inspiration from Arabian Nights and tells the story of this horrible man who makes a wager with his friend that if the friend can seduce his wife within 100 nights, he can have her and like this guy's castle. And the friend goes along with this thinking it's going to be a piece of cake, but the wife doesn't want this, and she's actually in love with her maid. And so when they realize that this is happening, they plot to like tell this man all of these amazing stories to keep him distracted so that he won't be able to do what he's trying to do. We get to follow the story of the wife and the maid and the friend and all of that, but we also get to read some of the stories that the women tell, which are super engaging and fantastical and magical, and the way that all of these stories tie together in the end is just impeccable. The second one, Glass Town, is a little bit different. It tells the story of the Bronte siblings and the imaginary world that they created as children. So we meet the three Bronte sisters, which I'm sure you've heard of, and then they also have a brother. And what happens is that they lose their two eldest siblings. And in their grief and to try to escape, they create this imaginary world together, which they escape into. Literally. This is fiction, but it's based on some biographical evidence, and they did create this world together, but obviously this takes it a step further and they actually like escape into it. And it's a beautiful book about war and siblings and friendship and grief, and it's so good. What I especially love about Greenberg's books is like the whimsy of them, and I love all of the humor. Like, these books always make me chuckle. And I have fallen in love with the art style. I think it's so good. I love the use of color, and just there's a lot of like fantastical elements to these two books, and the way that it's drawn is just so good. I think these books are just great. A little weird, but great. Then moving on to something a little bit different, we have got one of my favorite books that I read last year. It was Garlic and the Vampire by Bree Paulsen. This is the sweetest thing ever. In it, we follow our main character, Garlic, who is a very anxious little thing, but she lives in a village of vegetable folk. And what happens is that a vampire moves into the neighborhood and everyone freaks out. And they feel like someone needs to go confront the vampire, and they decide that Garlic should go because Garlic is Garlic. And so, nervous as she is, off she goes to find the vampire. This is for sure like a simple story in a lot of ways, but it is so lovely and enjoyable. I absolutely adore the art in here. I love how the characters are drawn and like their expressions. And if you need like a pick-me-up one day, this is the book for you. It's just so lovely. Next, we have got Sheets by Brenna Thummler, which is also a super cute book. It follows this teenage girl who has a lot on her plate. She has like school, regular teenage life, but she's also in charge of running the family's laundromat, and she has a lot going on in her family life, and she's struggling quite a lot. Then this ghost named Wendell comes into the picture because he goes into the human world, which is forbidden, but he goes and he meets this girl who obviously freaks out at first, and they basically become friends. Their friendship with each other kind of changes everything for both of them. And this is just so sweet and heartwarming. And again, the art is just amazing. I'm gonna say that about all of these books, just bear with me, but like all of this art is just excellent. I especially love the color palette in here. It's like sort of pastel-y, which I'm usually not into, but in this it really works. And oh, this is just such a good book. Then we have got another sweet, heartwarming book. I really like these kinds of graphic novels. They just do it for me for some reason. This is The Prince and the Dressmaker by Wang. And in here we follow this prince who lives in Paris at the dawn of the modern age, and he has this alter ego named Lady Crystalia who takes the city by storm at night, and this alter ego is made possible by this dressmaker who is also his best friend. His parents, though, have no idea about this, and no one really knows, and the parents are busy trying to get him a wife in the story, and we just follow how this story goes. This is a slightly like more cartoonish style, but I really like it. I really like how the characters are drawn, and again, the use of color is great. I really like Wang's like art style. I think it's really cool. I do think like this story has a very obvious message, and it really like hammers in the point, which is fine, but it is a little bit like, it really like tells you what to think in a way, but it is an important message, and I really enjoyed it. And again, if you just need a little bit of like a pick-me-up and a sweet, nice story, this is amazing. We're staying on the same sweet and heartwarming train with Pumpkinheads by Rowell. This, like, if you don't just read this right away and you manage to wait until fall, this is the perfect, like, autumn read. Just looking at the color palette of this, like, this is the perfect book for fall. Like, it literally screams fall. This is also a story about friendship, and it's about these two friends who every year for the past like couple of years they have worked at this pumpkin patch during fall, but this is their last season and it's their last shift because next year they are going off to college. And because it is their last shift, they decide to make an adventure out of the day, and we basically just follow them as they go and experience this pumpkin patch that they've worked in for years. We get to know them as people and as friends, and they have a little bit of like a mission that they're trying to achieve, and it's a very, again, super sweet story about friendship. And I read this for the first time 2 years ago, I think, and then I reread it last fall because it is the perfect fall read. It's so sweet, and the art is just so, like, the colors, just talking about this book makes me excited for fall, which I realize it's too soon, but I kind of look forward to fall anytime it is not fall. Another one that is also fantastic for that season, although slightly less cozy, is Through the Woods by Emily Caroll. This is also one of the first graphic novels that I read, and this contains 5 stories, all of which are pretty creepy and spine-chilling, not gonna lie. What makes this so cool though, and so impactful, is the art. The art is really, like, it does a lot to add stuff to these stories and, like, add a creep factor. And I love the color palette in here. Most of the colors that we see are black, white, blue, and then there's quite a lot of red, which you can imagine what the red color usually is. And like, if you have like a stormy dark night one day and you want to creep yourself out, this is the perfect book to read. And when it's fall, it is just, oh, it's so good. Then I have got this trio of books, which is really cool. These are basically retellings of classic fairy tales. So we have got Cinderella, we have Snow White, and then Alice in Wonderland. And obviously, just looking at these, they are very cool. I do think these are made for kids and they're supposed to like help you learn how to read, which is super cool. But obviously, like, I'm an adult and I love these. I think the way that they're made is super, super cool. And like, the art is very particular, but I love it. I think maybe calling these graphic novels is a slight stretch, but they are very heavily illustrated, so I'm just gonna go with it. And like, the art is just like super cool. The two that are fairy tales are the ones that are the most heavily illustrated, whereas Alice in Wonderland more feels like an illustrated version of the novel. So I do think calling this a graphic novel is a stretch, but I just wanted to show you these because they're so good. And they do have some pages that are just like full illustrations, if I can find one. Like this one is just an illustration, which is really cool. I do realize this kind of art style is a little particular, but I think it's very creative and it fits with like these kinds of stories, which, although they are for children, they are quite dark. Lastly, before we move on to the TBR, I want to show you this wonderful little book called Strange Planet by Nathan Pyle. And this basically has like comic book strips, if that's what you call it. And they're all about these aliens, like these funny aliens who live on a strange planet, which, spoiler alert, the aliens are us and the weird planet is Earth. And it's all about the absurdity of like different everyday situations. And it's just, it is so funny. Obviously the art is quite like simpler, but you really get to know these creatures and You're gonna fall in love with them, I promise. I just think these stories are super funny. And if you want a sneak peek, there is an Instagram with a lot of these, so you're welcome to go take a look at that. But like, having this little book is just the best thing. We're gonna move on to my TBR though, which usually for these types of videos, I have like a whole stack of books to show you, but this time I actually only have 3 physical copies, and then I have a couple that I just want to talk about that I am planning on getting because they're really high on my TBR. But graphic novels are generally a little bit more expensive, so I don't buy them as often, but I do have like a whole list of ones that I want to get and read. So I'm gonna tell you about some of those as well. We're gonna start with the 3 that I have physical copies of. The first one is called Squire, and this follows this young girl who lives in a kingdom. She comes from a suppressed group of people, and this kingdom seems to be like, there's been a lot of turmoil in it, and it's not exactly peaceful. And this girl has always dreamed of becoming a knight, but she hasn't been able to. But then another war is about to break out, and this offers her an opportunity to sign up to become a knight. It's not what she imagined though, and she has to like navigate a lot of new friendships and rivalries, and I also think she has to hide who she is and what group of people she's coming from. I'm sure there's gonna be a lot that happens in this book. It is a little bit of a thicker one, but I think the art looks really good and the characters look really interesting. Like, I like how they're drawn. I like the color palette. I'm sure it's gonna be amazing. The second one that I have is another one of those sweet looking ones. It's Mooncakes, which is also a very sweet title. And in here, we follow this teenage witch who works in a bookshop, and in her free time, she likes to look into supernatural occurrences in her little town, which is the best thing I've ever heard of. One fateful night though, she goes to investigate this, like, I think there are some people in this little town that have seen like a wolf running about, and she goes to investigate this, which, like, brave girl, I would have never done that. I would have ran in the other direction, but she goes to investigate, and she finds this boy in the woods who was her childhood crush, who happens to be a werewolf. Again, really like the art style. It looks excellent, and I love any story that has to do with like a witch and also like a bookshop. Like, it literally doesn't get any better. Then I have, of course, the sequel to Garlic and the Vampire called Garlic and the Witch, and I didn't look into this at all before getting it. I was just like, I love the first one, there's a sequel, I'm gonna get it. And again, the art looks amazing, and I think the story is about Garlic again, but there's something to do with the witch that she's friends with named Agnes, who's also in the first book. And that's all I really know. I am sort of like saving this, I'm not gonna lie. I'm saving this for a rainy day when I need it, and when I do, I just know it's gonna put me in a good mood. Moving on to the ones that I don't have physical copies of, the next 2 are the follow-ups to Sheets by Brenna Thummler. They're called Delicates and Lights, I'm pretty sure. Delicates is already out, and I really want to get it, and Lights is coming out this fall, I think. And it's gonna be like these 3 books, and I think they're done, which I really like. And I don't really know what the stories are gonna be about. I'm assuming we're following the same characters. I'm assuming like this teenage girl still has a quite complicated life, but I'm looking forward to meeting the characters again and seeing how it goes and where they end up. And I do love this little ghost person, like, he's so cute. Then we have this beautiful looking book called Hungry Ghost, which I discovered quite recently, and the story is about this girl who is quiet, studious, and above all, thin. And she is really, really struggling, and no one really knows that she's struggling with food, not even her best friend. But then I think something like tragic happens in her life, and it makes her look at herself and her priorities. And it sounds harrowing, but very good. And whenever I find a book like online and I think I want to read it and it's a graphic novel, I always look up and see if I can find any of the art to see what it looks like, because sometimes the cover doesn't match what's on the inside. And this is one I found online, and I looked up the art and it looks excellent. It is a little bit different than the cover, but it looks so, so good. And I love the color palette of what I saw. I do think it's gonna be like maybe a little bit of a heavy book, but it just looks so good. Next, we have a book called Nimona, which I've had on my radar for several years and I just haven't gotten around to picking it up. And the story is about this supervillain and their sidekick, and I think this is one of the more like lighter, funny ones, and their main goal is to like show that the heroes of this world are not as heroic as everyone says. I've heard so many good things about this, and based on the kinds of graphic novels that I like reading, I think this is gonna be right up my alley. Second to last, we have This One Summer, which is also one I've had on my radar for a while, and I kind of want to read it when it's summer, so maybe I should get it soon. Although maybe I'm just looking for an excuse to get this book. But it looks so good. It's about these friends who, I think the main character always goes to this lake house in the summer, and they've gone every year, and this friend of theirs is also there. I don't know if they're just kind of like seasonal friends or if they're from the same place, but they've always had a really good time. But then this year, things are not going as well. The main character's parents are fighting a lot, and that's all I really know. I have seen the art of this. It looks really good, and I've also seen this recommended a lot, which makes me think that I'm gonna like it. Lastly, we have one that I think I want to read, but I'm including it in this list because I want to know if any of you have read it and if you think I would like it, because I can't quite tell. I go back and forth. It's Heartstopper, which I think is the first in the series. I think there are like 5 books out now, which I don't quite know how I feel about, but I see these books everywhere and I can't quite tell if they're for me. It follows these 2 boys who meet at this British all-boys school and they become friends, and I think maybe it evolves into something more, and all of that sounds great. But I do wonder if the series is like you can read the books as standalones like sheets, or if it's like you have to read all of them. Like if you read the first one, you have to read all 5. If any of you have read all of them, let me know. And I really wonder if I would like it or not. The art looks really good though, so I really should just give the first one a go. That was the last book though, which means that we have reached the end of yet another video. I would love to hear all about your favorite graphic novels in the comments, and if you have any recommendations, send them my way. I will add them to my already quite long graphic novel TBR list, but I can never get enough, so if you have any recs, let me know. As always, thank you very much for hanging out with me today, and I will see you soon. Bye!